being anti-Ubisoft makes you far right. Man, that's crazy. Where do these people come from?
As you probably know, there's been some major Ubisoft news occurring over the last 24 hours or so, stuff that we also talked about in the second segment of the day yesterday, so if you saw that, you should be in the loop with everything. But just to recap super quick, AC Shadows has been delayed to February 2025. Ubisoft admits that Outlaws is underselling, and in a message released to investors, Ubisoft addressed
I don't think that underselling is... I think they're underselling the fact that they're underselling. I think that it was a... Like, because they're coming out with, like, roadmaps, tweets. They're explaining, no, guys, please keep playing the game. Please play the game. Yeah, I think it's way worse than what we'd imagine. I've never seen a company do this in a way that was not cataclysmic. You know? Very problematic.
A number of issues at the company and outlines some changes that they're going to try to help fix them. This following an internal probe also going on at Ubisoft to try and understand why the company has been failing so massively over the last number of years. And finally, Ubisoft CEO Yves Guillemot. Did I get the name right that time? Well, he's made a statement saying that Ubisoft really doesn't have an agenda, and this particular statement has actually enraged...
It's upset a lot of people, because them saying and coming out saying that they don't have an agenda with the game, what that does is it basically makes the concerns that, you know, these people that are considered like, oh, incels or whatever, it validates them. Because it says, like, you are important enough for us to respond to you.
Of armchair activists and similar type of journalists. That's what we're going to be going over in this video, as it should be very entertaining, so I hope you're ready, and let's enjoy. We start with Paul Tassi, who's responding to Stefan Totilo, who said, from CEO, regarding polarized comments around Ubisoft, I want to reaffirm that we are an entertainment-first company, creating games for the broadest possible audience, and our goal is not to push any specific agenda. We remain committed to creating games that everyone can enjoy.
That's right.
That being the statement from Yves that I mentioned earlier, and Paul Tassi responds saying, it is embarrassing, Ubisoft is admitting, that they're actually rattled by the culture war stuff over Outlaws and Shadows.
They're not rattled by it. The only thing that's being rattled is their balance sheet. And if people aren't pre-ordering the game and they think the game's going to be awful, that's really fucking bad. And it doesn't matter at a certain point. Like, this is the problem, is that these companies are realizing that they... Like, you can have, like, an agenda with the game, and as long as it doesn't, like, you know, completely overshadow the game, people aren't really going to care. But if you champion agendas and viewpoints that are not really what your audience wants to see, you're not going to sell the game. It's that simple. And I think that this is becoming more true and more important as gaming becomes more worldwide. So, like, I'll give you a really good example. Black Myth Wukong. Black Myth Wukong has sold more copies than almost any other AAA game in a very long time. It's sold over 20 million copies. And why is that? It's because they appealed to an audience of people and they met that audience of people. And the issue is that Western values and Western journalism values, even more narrowed, are becoming less important inside of the market of gaming because gaming is being... like, it's being outsourced, or not really outsourced, but it's being exported to other parts of the world. And this is a great thing, by the way. It's being exported to places like, obviously, there's the, you know, like Korea, right? It's been gaming for a long time. But now they're more involved socially. Now you're seeing China get involved with gaming a lot. You're seeing the Middle East get involved with gaming tremendously, right? Even with tournaments and stuff. You're seeing another really, really big one. The best fans that you can possibly fucking have, in my opinion, are the guys from South America and people in the Spanish community. They are ride or die. Like, I am jealous of some of the people there. Yes, they are crazy rabid. They're super supportive, everything like that. And come to Brazil. Yes, exactly. Brazil goes crazy. And so you're seeing these narratives become less important because as gaming was made basically by the West for the West, it's going to be Western centric. It's going to have Western values. But now as we're seeing gaming become more worldwide and incorporate more cultures, it becomes increasingly more difficult to put narrow Western viewpoints into video games and not have them alienate other audiences. Because the truth is that a lot of issues that the West is more progressive on, things like trans issues, LGBT issues, women's issues, things like that. Like, let's say we're at a 7. A lot of places in the world are at like a 3. And so for those people, they will make a purchase decision based off of that, and they will think that it's bad. So, and I'll give you this is like an example of that. So there are a number of games in China that are like gacha games that do not have male characters. Azura Promelia, which is the new game that Azur Lane is making, that's like kind of a mix between like Genshin Impact and Pow World, has come out and stated preemptively, guys, don't worry, we're not going to add male characters. So that's the way that you can see how these different companies like will be affected by these audiences, because the companies never cared about these values. They only cared about money, and they only cared about the values to the extent that they thought it could make them money. The moment that it's not going to make them money, they'll kick the gay people out. Like if Nazis took over again, they would talk about how good Nazis are. That's the truth. That's what I think. And hey, if you don't believe me, ask Hugo Boss or Henry Ford. It's not even a hypothetical.
He had more to say than that, but before we get to that, let me share my opinion on this. Just simplifying all of these issues into culture war stuff seems like a very odd take by Paul Tassi, because this situation involves people in Japan talking about their country being disrespected, as they're also
that's all culture. That is culture war. It is, definitely it is.
Lied to by a massive corporation regarding their own history. But apparently to Paul Tassi, all of this is just culture war stuff. Now, if you're not familiar with Paul Tassi, he's often been criticized in gaming circles for numerous takes that he's made over the years that seem dismissive of the issue people have with things such as DEI. For example,
I think that a lot of people do that and they try to dismiss it like it doesn't matter. And this is probably the best strategy that I think they use, is that they basically make an appeal to triviality and they say, why do you care about this thing that we're doing? It's not a big deal. And I think that a lot of people don't have the right language to counter that type of an argumentation, because it's basically, who cares? Well, it's like, who cares? Well, you care, you're doing it. But people, like, it's a very good strategy because people don't see it that way. And so that's why they do that.
Back when Ubisoft issued their apology to the Japanese community, Paul Tassi had this to say. When the hyper-forced pushback to your game is the not Japanese culture war talking point of you putting a DI samurai in your game, I would not engage with these people at all.
You have to, and this is the thing, is that if there's enough people like this, you have to engage with them. Like, I bet a lot of the people in China that are making Azur Lane think that it's retarded that they won't buy characters that are male characters, and they're going to quit the game over that. But at the end of the day, the customer is never wrong. If the customer decides collectively that they don't want this in a game, then that's it. That's all there is to it. It doesn't matter like what you think or like how you think it should be or anything like that. You either make a product and you appeal to a market, or you don't. And if there's enough people who don't like something and they make that, like, for example, like, I'm trying to think like a good example of this, like gay inclusion, right? You're not going to just convince the Middle East to be okay with this, because culturally that's not what they like, right? They're not into that. So guess what? If you're making a game for that company or for that place in the world, for that audience, and you put that in the game, you will not sell your game. That's it. It doesn't matter what your values are. It matters what their values are. And there's not an equal footing here. The customer has all of the power, and the company only has the power to meet the customer's demand. That's all there is to it. I wouldn't engage these people at all. Yeah, and also they didn't engage with them. They didn't engage with them with Star Wars Outlaws. And I think that's what happened, is that Star Wars Outlaw came out, and the game had terrible sales, probably. I mean, they said it, and I think, again, they're downplaying it. It had terrible sales, and so now they see the same thing potentially happening with Assassin's Creed, and they're freaking out. They're worried. Yeah, they're like, oh my God, if we do this again, we're not going to make enough money.
So it also looks like he has a history of dismissing the issues that Japanese people have with AC Shadows. This is, of course, just one more example. I don't want to go through all this guy's tweets, just giving you a little bit more context. It's a truly bizarre thing how many armchair activist types and journalists, etc., are in complete denial about the failures of DEI. In my opinion, DEI is largely something that companies have tried to use for profit motives, attempts to appeal to ESG funds, and things like that.
Well,
so whenever
and I think that also, like, you have a really bad feedback loop with DEI stuff. So when a company shifts towards trying to like seek DEI funding, the reason why they're probably doing that is because they can't seek funding from another perspective. So, you know, the game can't exist on its own merits. So they add in a type of representation that qualifies them for a certain amount of money. And what that does is it creates a feedback loop where games that are, you know, forcing DEI in order to get certain types of funding will be more often bad, because the reason why they're getting that funding is because they couldn't get other funding. And the reason why they couldn't get other funding is because the game wasn't good to begin with. You see what I'm saying? Like, I understand it's like, that's kind of like a long chain of logic, but I think it very much tracks.
I see someone defending those sort of practices, to me, they just come off as massive corporate bootlickers. Now, as DEI has been failing and actually been costing these corporations more and more money in many cases, the topic comes up more and more. And we see more people criticizing that stuff, as well as more people like Paul Tassi seemingly attempting to dismiss those criticisms. Another example of this, albeit perhaps to a lesser extent, were some of the takes that he was making during Concord, where he seemed to be in denial of sorts about the game's terrible player count after launch.
It's been two more hours. I've been waiting several hours for Concord players to break 700, and it hasn't. Come on, man. You could do it. You could do it. I'm genuinely wondering if something is glitching. This is the 70th something most sold game on Steam, which isn't good, but like, you would have to imagine there'd be more than this. Like, dude, this was crazy. It's a glitch, man. Like, I remember I had this glitch happen in Overwatch where I downranked from gold to silver. And I still think it was a glitch. I do. Nobody else does, but I think it was a glitch, man.
Wondering if it was even just a glitch or something.
Yeah.
It's like it's impossible for some people to admit the issues with the character roster. And how practices such as DEI largely contributed to a number of issues.
I knew this wouldn't go well, but it's legitimately weird. Suicide Squad launched with 20x more players. I'm actually wondering if there's something else going on. The timing is weird too. Like, it peaked early afternoon and didn't even add a couple hundred players after work and school in America. I don't get it. I do. How is it that everybody understands this but him? Everybody understands. Like, and this is the thing, right? Is like, if you bury your head in the sand long enough, you think that's the way the world is. But no, people didn't like it. That's why.
Game. Now, I'm not saying that all of the issues with Concord were simply DI related. For example, the price point in the saturated market, sure, these were also contributing factors to Concord's massive failure, but when you see people ignoring the DI related issues as well, it comes off as ignorant or bad faith. And for those that don't know, the person Paul Tassi was talking to in those screenshots, Gene Park, who was also seemingly in denial in their own way, claims to be affiliated with the Washington Post. Anyways, back to the...
I think Gene puts out some pretty decent content. I think I follow him on Twitter. I like him. Yeah, I like Paul too. I just... I really... You gotta come to Jesus with this shit, man. You like Paul? No, I think he's had... The thing is that I might disagree with him on his opinion and like his viewpoint on this stuff, but I think he's had good takes on other games and good takes on other topics. So like, to me, it's like, I don't really think of it like, oh, there's one thing that this person has that's bad. And so like, example, I think his opinion on Seasons with Diablo 4 was really good. And I also liked what he said about, I think it was it Destiny 2? I'm trying to remember. Give me a second. About Pal World and like the way that Pal World's player numbers were. So like that's two examples that I can come up with right off the top of my head. Yeah, sure.
Current news with Ubisoft and Paul Tassie's takes on this stuff going on right now, he added this to his other tweet saying, Outlaws could have starred a guy who looks like Han Solo, and Shadows could have starred a guy who looks like Jin Sakai, and I do not think it would meaningfully change the fortunes of either of those games.
Who knows?
I think this would be a larger contributing factor
Yeah.
to AC Shadows. Star Wars Outlaws has a number of other issues aside from people just not liking the MC. For example, a lot of people said that the gameplay was just boring, especially the stealth segments, which is a large part of the game. And that you didn't feel all that much like an outlaw. Like you were very limited in the so-called immoral stuff that you could do in the game itself.
Exactly. And I think that's really the problem, is that a lot of times, like, the female protagonist, you know, like black protagonist is not really the main issue. It's that ideology that causes people to make decisions like that permeates the rest of the game. So, like, for example, with Star Wars Outlaws, how you can't kill the animals, but you can pet them, and you can only steal from police officers. Like, the problem is not, like, that there's that one thing. The problem is that one thing is an indicator for a worldview that the game is developed around, and that worldview creates a very flaccid experience. That's really what it is. It's lack of focus on what's important, right? Yeah, exactly. But, like, that's just one point of an indicator, right? Maybe Disney didn't allow it. I don't know what the reason is for it. All I'm saying is that it's not good.
Of course, there's also been numerous glitches, and these are just a few brief examples of some of the issues that people have with Star Wars Outlaws. But for Paul Tassi to suggest that having an actual Japanese male lead for AC Shadows wouldn't meaningfully change the fortune of the game seems like an absolutely insane thing to say. And once again...
Yeah, again, like, look at Black Myth Wukong, right? The game farmed and, like, you know, respected Chinese culture, and it got 2 million concurrent players. Absolutely appealing to an audience of people will get you to have those people play the game. It's not even a question. Yeah, China loved it. Yeah, they did, obviously. So 2.5? It was a lot.
And it also seems dismissive towards the issues that many people in Japan, many Japanese people, have with the game. It's really odd that Paul Tassi seems to have a recurring theme where he's very dismissive towards the issues that Japanese people have towards AC Shadows.
I think that the reason why is that a lot of the people that are Japanese that have problems with Assassin's Creed Shadows are living in Wisconsin, and they live in Massachusetts, or they live in Florida, and they have Google Translate, and they say, you know, I'm not Japanese, but I think this is bad. So that's the reason why. But I think in general, a lot of journalists have tried to compartmentalize and act like the concerns that people have over games like this aren't valid and they're not meaningful. And I think that in doing so, they've damaged their own reputations. It's like basically like you can be, you know, behind a burning building and be like, yeah, everything's fine. This is great. And at a certain point, it becomes so obvious what the elephant in the room is that the people that are not talking about it seem delusional.
I think there's other issues that AC Shadows has. I mean, there's clearly other reasons why Ubisoft delayed the game. The probability of them changing Yasuke at this point seems near 0%. So there's probably other things that they're trying to polish, which also falls in line with the other parts of the statement.
Which, by the way, is absolutely necessary. Like, it was, the game was awful. It looked awful. Like, I think that, again, people get focused on, like, oh, wow, Black Samurai, oh, bad. Look at the combat portions of the game. It's awful. The floating doors, yes. As I said, guys, that is not even going to be in the top 10 problems with this game when it comes out.
That they made. Also, as I mentioned yesterday, there's also just a general negative perception and a loss of goodwill that Ubisoft has had. So perhaps they're going to try and spend the next few months trying to recover some goodwill at least before releasing AC Shadows. The point I'm making here is there's other issues going on with AC Shadows besides just Yasuke. But again, Yasuke is certainly a huge factor.
It's the easiest thing that people can say. It's the easiest thing that people can latch onto and be like, wow. Like, it's the same thing. Remember what I said before about how, like, the reason why identity politics is so popular is because it's very easy to go, oh, well, I think that men shouldn't go in the women's bathroom. well, if you're black and oh god, but they're white, I'm black, oh god. And like identity politics, well, women should not be able to do this. Like, what the fuck are you doing? But the fact is that that type of thinking is the most it is the most common. It is the lowest common denominator. And because it's the lowest common denominator, it's going to get the most people. So that's why everything is reduced down to identity politics. It's because identity politics has no barrier to entry of understanding it. Whereas like seeing physics in games, understanding like are these items from actually this period in the game, like what about this combat thing? There's like more barriers to entry there. It's more accessible. Yeah, like this literally is face value. And so it's simple. It's easily weaponized, and it's weaponized to the largest mass of people.
All of this leads us to an article that Paul Tassi wrote today for Forbes titled After Assassin's Creed Shadows Delay, Ubisoft Acknowledges Outlaws Issue, Anti-Woke Pushback. It's funny that he complains about culture war stuff even when that label is oversimplifying the issues going on and is also, as I mentioned, rather dismissive towards the issues at large. But then he's also going to simultaneously write an article that's like, oh, it's just anti-woke pushback. Seems like this guy.
Well, even if it is just anti-woke pushback, if there's enough people that are anti-woke, then the games have to be anti-woke. It's just that simple. Like and this is what I said before about like the Chinese like gacha players. It doesn't matter like what the company thinks the game should have in it. At the end of the day, if you make a game with male characters, they're not going to buy them. So you can talk about and like trying to like admonish and like punish and like talk down to and shame the audience into purchasing something is never going to work. It's not like you can just talk to these people and be like, oh, yeah, you need to buy this game. It's bad not to buy this game. They don't love money, though. Well, they do. That's why they're going to change it. So that you can't bully an audience into buying a product. It just doesn't work.
Is actually propagating culture war stuff, if anything. The article goes over some of the stuff that we've already covered here in this video and others, so I'm skipping all that. Yeah. And let's check out this section where he writes, then, Ubisoft surprisingly tacitly acknowledged the narrative that its games have become too woke or agenda-driven, according to a segment of the internet. And posting that statement from Eves where he denies Ubisoft having any specific agenda. He then writes, while Ubisoft already apologized to its Japanese audiences over some questionable promotional materials for Shadows, the pushback was also about the inclusion of Yasuke as one of the two leads, a legendary black samurai, where there was an ensuing debate of whether he was actually a samurai, and a stated idea that it shouldn't be starring him at all. It's pretty funny that despite all of the evidence coming out that Yasuke really wasn't...
Well, I mean, the legendary black, and this is the problem, right? Is like this type of writing, legendary black samurai. I think that again, like if you want to be persuasive, it's very hard to read this and to not see that there is a very clear agenda with what's being written. Like, it is. There's just obviously an agenda with this, right? And, like, if I read this, I'm thinking, okay, well, like, is it true or not? So Legendary, nobody knows him? I guess so. Yasuke is more fabled than Legend? I don't know. I don't really think it matters, right? But at the end of the day, if you want to call the guy a samurai and then base your work off of a person who sources themselves on Wikipedia on an alt account, then I don't think that you should really... Like, you shouldn't really ride that horse too hard. People clearly see through this bullshit. Ubisoft stock went down 60%. Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, is that if you do something like this, there's going to be a negative effect.
Conclusively a samurai, something that Ubisoft themselves has also admitted. Here's Paul Tassi claiming he was not just a samurai, but a legendary one. He goes on to write, there was similar pushback to Kay Vess leading Star Wars Outlaws as a woman, and a not attractive enough woman at that. So
well, of course. There's people, like a lot of people that are into Star Wars are guys, and so they want to play a hot chick. Yeah. Duh. I mean, what? Of course. Like, what? Like, what are we talking about? Like, obviously. No shit, of course. It's so weird. It's so weird. What are we talking about here?
He's really not going to mention that the main issue here was that Ubisoft made her less attractive. Like, they went out of their way to make Kay Vess less attractive than the actress that she's based on.
I don't even agree with that. I think that the people that made the game are just bad at making games and bad at their job. Everything about this game was bad, and I don't think that this was an outcome of malice, and it was just pure incompetence. I don't. I just think
that's
the game
very
sucked.
bizarre and certainly worth pointing out.
Yeah.
But hey, Paul Tassi ain't going to mention that part here. He then says, no historical accuracy complaints there, as it was pretty straightforward woke/DI talking points there.
Yeah.
But it is surprising to see Ubisoft entertain this at all. There's another...
Well, it's not that they're entertaining this. It's that, and this is the problem, right, is that Ubisoft entertaining this is a misunderstanding of the power structure that companies exist inside of. Companies do not exist as a tool to spread an agenda. Companies exist as a tool to capitalize on culture and to make things that enhance the culture. So the idea that Ubisoft is giving this attention or like entertaining this, as he says, Ubisoft's job is to entertain people. They're an entertainment company. So if they're entertaining what people want to see, then they're going to make money. And if they're not, then they don't make money. It's that simple. And I think that also, like, it's again the problem where I think that people are so entrenched in their ideological positions that they think that everybody else thinks like they do, and that the entire world revolves around this. Most people don't think like this. They don't worry about this. They just see it. They see some comments. They say the game looks bad, and then that's it.
Another article I found that has very odd coverage, to say the least, regarding all this Ubisoft stuff. This one from fastcompany.com. The author Chris Morris writing, video game maker Ubisoft in chaos after anti-DEI backlash.
I didn't even see this.
The Assassin's Creed game maker delayed its biggest launch of the year, reduced forecasts, and is facing calls to sell in what is being called an incel victory.
What? Bro, this is the reason why people hate journalism. What is being called an incel victory is what is being called? Being called by who? Who decided it's being called this? Did you decide this? Are you calling it this? By 3 people on Twitter with a like that has 7 likes? Oh, wow. Oh, man. What, an incel looks like this? Yes. Aren't you king of the incels? I've heard that before. What a bunch of pussies? It's nuts, man.
Okay, first of all, I haven't seen anyone say incel victory anywhere. Seems like this guy just made that up. And once again, I'll point out how these sort of people come off as such bigots, man. Dismissing the issues that Japanese people have with this game. Very reasonable and understandable issues. And then saying this is like an incel victory? Seriously?
Well, to be fair, and this is the problem, is that incel, alt-right, racist, DEI, anti-woke, all of this is just put together in one bucket, right? Where there's a lot of people that aren't incels that don't like this, and there's some people that are incels that do like it. So they're just buzzwords, right? Yeah, they're just buzzwords. It's basically like word diarrhea. They use the straw man argument always. Exactly.
These virtue signaler types are so hypocritical.
Yeah.
And they're also just weird. I mean, who even talks like that? Oh, it's an incel victory. Like, either this guy made that up.
I would say something like that. Absolutely. I say stupid shit like that all the time. And I definitely think that there are a lot of incels that do think that it's a victory. But to title the article in incel, that's crazy.
Up, or this must be some terminally online Redditor talk here or something. Moving on. Because, spoiler alert, it's as bad in the article itself, or arguably even worse. He pulls out the classic, oh, the backlash is just from the far right. My gosh, these people are boring with their rhetoric, saying the same.
Well, the thing is that if there's enough people that are on the far right, then it matters. That's the truth. It's literally that simple. And That's what I said before, is like, if you get enough people together, you can do anything that you want. And if you try to relegate this viewpoint and like pretend like it's only a small subset of people, but it's actually not, then you're not going to have a lot of sales for your game. So that's it. It doesn't matter. Like, and I think that, again, you can only act like this isn't a small group. This is a small group of people. You can only do that long enough until eventually people ask, well, if it's so few people, then why are there so many people not buying our game?
Nonsense for years and years and years, and they wonder why people don't listen to them anymore. Check it out. Right here he says, the bookings shortfall was technically due to the delay and disappointing sales of Star Wars Outlaws. However, the underlying reason for both of those, at least in part, is the far-right opposition to diversity and inclusion.
If they're right, if that's true, then the company has two options. You either meet that demand or you go out of business. That's it. Those are the two options. So if you think this is true, because like the company isn't going to be able to like psyop people into buying this. They're not going to be able to like, mind control people into buying this. It's just shifting blame. Yeah, that again, just because you think the market is immoral does not make the market change.
Oh my gosh, what a joke. Yeah, diversity and inclusion, something that corporations love to gaslight people about. Oh, hey, we really care about this stuff. Not really. We just want money. But hey, if you criticize these corporations...
Yeah, Outlaws, which has received had a female lead character, received mostly solid reviews from professional critics. But many players gave it a 0 rating out of 10 on Metacritic, citing forced DEI narratives and claiming developers spent more time on woke culture than the story and gameplay. Well, then it's got a 0. That's it. It's crazy how people like this can be at such odds with reality. That's what's so astonishing to me about this. It's like they're completely against reality. Like they can't even see what's clearly in front of them. They're writing themselves into a different reality. Yeah, exactly. Like professional critics gave it a good review. Well, if professional critics keep giving it good reviews and these reviews aren't resonating with an audience, maybe you shouldn't be a professional critic.
You're apparently far right for criticizing corruption in corporations. He goes on to say, Outlaws, which has a female lead character, received mostly solid reviews from professional critics. Oh, professional critics. But many players gave it a 0 rating out of 10 on Metacritic, citing quote-unquote forced DI narratives and claiming the developers, quote, spent more time on the woke culture than on the story and gameplay, unquote. Some players were also unhappy with the optional season pass model that tacked an additional $40 onto the game's price for extra missions.
True.
The review bombing, driven by anti-DI backlash, seemingly worked and set off a chain of events.
Yep, that's right. Of course it worked. You know why? It's because there was enough people to do it. You get enough people together, you can do anything you want. Absolutely. Yep.
That led to Wednesday's announcement. I forgot to mention this. In the intro of the article, he says, Ubisoft abruptly canceled its appearance at the Tokyo Game Show and postponed all press previews of the upcoming Assassin's Creed Shadows. Wednesday, we learned why. Anti-DI backlash has sent the company spinning. So for one, as funny as that is, there's also a lot more going on with Ubisoft than the anti-DI stuff. Like, for example, they've been mismanaged heavily for years. But leave it up to this so-called journalist veteran to not...
Isn't it funny how there's clearly a lot of people with these views, but he just dismisses them as if their view is meaningless? The reason why they do that is that they think that if you don't talk about it for long enough, that it will cause people to just move past it or not think about it. That's what they try to do. Yeah, like they're like, okay, well, let's pretend like this doesn't exist, and that way we don't give it more power. Yeah, they're hoping like, yeah, let's marginalize and pretend like this doesn't exist, and then maybe it will go away. There's something to be said about critics giving favorable reviews, not because the character's a woman, but a lot of negative reviews do focus on her being a woman, no? Well, no, that's not really true because a critic exists to inform an audience. And if a critic's information isn't resonating with an audience, then a critic's purpose is invalid. So if a person is reviewing things and the reviews are not serving a purpose to the customer, then the review has no reason to exist. There's no, like, basically it's the chicken and the egg thing, but it's actually not. It's the egg is first and then the egg turns into the chicken. The egg is the consumer, not the fucking reviewer. The consumer creates the desire for the review. The review does not create the desire for the consumer. People got it all fucked up. They don't understand what their goal is. They don't understand what their purpose is.
Acknowledge that, and to try and smear all of the Ubisoft critics as a bunch of far-right incels as he seemingly attempts to defend this massive corrupt corporation. And that's about all that I have to say on this topic. Just
It's
truly
funny.
bizarre stuff from these journalists.
Yeah.
However, I suppose that's to be expected in this day and age, and part of why they're now such a disgraced profession. Let me know what you think about all of this stuff in the comments. As always, thank you so much for tuning in, and if you enjoyed my coverage, consider liking and or subscribing to the channel for more, and I'll see you in the next one.
Well, give me 1 second.
As you probably know,
I think this is so fucking funny. I'm going to be honest. I think this is fucking hilarious. Because again, like it's a narrative that, would you admit that people are hyper-fixated on finding agendas over actual gameplay experiences? They are. People are hyper-fixated on it. And I think that the reason why they're hyper-fixated on it is because the fact that those agendas exist in the game makes them feel like the game is taking advantage of them and isn't representing them in a proper way that they feel like is respectful. So, like, whether you, and this is the problem, is that, like, you're making a value judgment on whether this person should be allowed to have this opinion or not, or whether this opinion is justifiable. And that is not the right opinion to have when you're trying to sell a product to a market. Like, I and this is true with streaming too. You can think that you had the best stream ever. You can think that you make the best videos ever. But if those videos don't resonate with an audience, you're not going to make any money. That's all there is to it. And so you have people that are so focused on the good or bad of what they're seeing or what they're doing that they're not thinking about the reality of what is or is not. It's not about what should or shouldn't be. It's about what is and isn't. And I think that a lot of these people don't understand that. And they think that they have, like, an ability to control what other people think, which is not what happens. They still have their jobs in journalism, so they're still making money. Yeah, but they're making a lot less money than they would have made 10 years ago proportionally because they're just not monetizing in the same way. Scholarly Court. Yeah, and so that's the reason why, is that, like, you might think that that review is invalid, and you might think, hey, I think this is stupid that they care so much about this gender issue when there's other issues in the game that are more important. And if you have this viewpoint, I think you're totally justified in thinking that. But the problem is that that viewpoint does not invalidate that other person's viewpoint. And at the end of the day, he has the same vote that you do. So if he chooses not to buy the game, then that means, like, it doesn't matter what the reason is behind it. The only thing that matters is whether it happens or not. So a lot of people, like, again, they're trying to, like, base their decision off of, like, justifying this. Well, there is no justification for it. It's not people, like, because you're asking people to justify their reviews, and asking a person to justify their review presupposes that they are accountable to you. It presupposes that you have to justify why you gave your review to me. And the truth is that they don't have to do that. They're not accountable to you. They can have whatever opinion they want, and that's it. It's that simple. And I'll link you guys the video. It's a good one. Give it a like.